Hello. Welcome back to the Space Gulag. Today we're going to find out what happened had Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader been two different people. Before we begin, special thanks to all of our patrons, and go check out the Twitch podcast and other things if you want to support me in other ways. Otherwise, let's get straight into our story. Our story begins in two different locations across the galaxy, one of the locations being Exegol and the other location being on Tatooine. Two children were born at the same exact time, both of them being products of the Force. Plagueis and Palpatine were messing around with the Force, trying to create a singular being, and in response the Force created two beings of the Force, one of them being born of the light, and the other being born of the dark. On Tatooine, born into slavery was a child by the name of Anakin Skywalker. On Exegol, born to the Sith Eternal, was the child by the name of Vader. There was no first or last name, just Vader. Both children created a cosmic shift in the galaxy. It could be felt by everyone connected to the Force, and the profound nature of the shift set off both the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi Council on Coruscant discussed the thought of going out into the galaxy and searching for this disturbance in the Force, but when it was put to a vote, it was quelled immediately. The Sith, on the other hand, wouldn't be so conservative in their approach to finding the children of the Force. Plagueis, being the Sith Lord, told Palpatine to go out across the galaxy and find these children in the Force. When he found the child, he was instructed to bring that child back to Coruscant at their residence. Palpatine would accept his orders and disappear out into the galaxy looking for this child of the Force. Palpatine was making his mind up about what he would do if he did find this child. Part of him believed he was ready to take over his master. But the truth is, Plagueis was so open about everything he learned that Palpatine ended up learning without having to do the work to learn. So there was a great appeal for Palpatine to stay with Plagueis for a little while more, especially because he could use his master to gain more knowledge until he was ready to actually execute him. For Palpatine, it was a flawless plan, but in terms of longevity, if he discovered the child of the Force, then the chances are that Palpatine would never have to worry about anything else. Regardless, Palpatine would spend time bouncing on and off worlds. As a senator, he was able to play it off by going to different planets around the Mid-Rim and the Outer Rim on behalf of Naboo. For Palpatine, it felt like it could be on a Sith world, but the issue was that his logic outweighed his feelings because there wasn't any populations on any of the planets that formerly belonged to the Sith, at least that he was aware of. Palpatine spent months traveling, finding no sight of this child of the Force. While Palpatine and Plagueis were convinced that there was an actual child of the Force, they hadn't realized that they had created two polar opposites in the Force, one of darkness and one of light. Though both children were born into darkness and pain, of course both of them could change from one to being in the dark, or both being in the dark, to one being in the light, or both being in the light. With the Force being so mysterious, it was easy to believe that everything would work out correctly. The only question remained, who would come out on top, the light or the dark? In terms of trillions upon trillions of lives inside of the galaxy, the chances of them interacting were beyond rare, but the Force worked in a way that would allow the two of these individuals to come into contact with each other. Possibly we decided over peace, possibly over conflict. Their fate hadn't yet been decided, they had only just become alive. Palpatine, after traveling for so long, returned to his master and informed him that he couldn't find the child. Plagueis informed Palpatine that he knew, because he had actually found the child himself without ever telling Palpatine. While Palpatine was out across the entire galaxy searching, Plagueis received the transmission from Exegol. Plagueis had been to Exegol with his master before him, but he never took Palpatine. He intended on doing so at some point in the next 10 or so years, but it just wasn't something on his mind at the moment. The Sith Eternal was a group of loyalists. They essentially served the Sith and did whatever the Sith asked them to do. They were the epitome of loyalists to what at this point was a dead religion with a dead martyr. Because while yes, Plagueis' master showed him Exegol, they never came into contact with the Sith Eternal. The Sith Eternal had been waiting for their return. There was a communication device passed down through generations of Sith, or essentially stolen from one student who killed their master. This device was a communication device from Exegol to the Sith. Its sole purpose was to bring the Sith back home if the Eternal had a valid reason to do so. Though the last time the Sith did, it was during the rule of Darth Vader, and he killed almost every single member of the Sith Eternal, aside from a good 20 to 30 members, so that they could repopulate. He thinned their lines out and told them that if they were to contact him or his followers, it would be for a valid reason, unless it would result in their death. Because he was brought here for a useless reason, and so he slaughtered them because at this point they were useless. Regardless, the Sith Eternal reached out to Plagueis because they had this child who had a very high midichlorian rate. It had been nearly 2,000 years since a member of the Sith Eternal had a midichlorian count at all. The last time one of them did, they were abducted into the ranks of the Sith. Though the only thing curious about this specific child is that there was no father. Plagueis knew instantly that this was a child that was a creation of the Force. He finally found it, and so Plagueis left to retrieve the child. Plagueis named the child Vader because of the child's evil strength. The reason Plagueis didn't call out to Palpatine was in case there was another child of the Force, though Plagueis himself found it skeptical that another child would have been born from the Force. Palpatine was actually a bit annoyed with his master, but in a way he understood, because if they accidentally created two beings in the Force, they wouldn't want the Jedi to get their hands on the equal in the Force to Vader. While there was actually another being in the Force, in Anakin Skywalker, they had no knowledge of his existence. Plagueis informed Palpatine that they would train Vader to become the best of them, and then they would use his plan to take over the galaxy, and Vader would be their path to unconquerable power. Palpatine grinned. He knew Plagueis' power would only be temporary, and so he allowed his master to rejoice for the time being. Vader would have a painful upbringing, mostly because he was forced to work all the time. Not like Anakin's upbringing was any better, being a slave on Tatooine, though the difference was the personalities. Anakin's mother, Shmi, was sweet, kind, patient, and caring, and as soon as Anakin was able to conceptualize what those meant, he adopted them as himself. Vader, on the other hand, would be forced to undergo nothing but pain. He would be tortured for doing the wrong thing, and he'd be forced to train under the dark side of the Force for the most of the hours of the day. While Plagueis and Palpatine had real jobs they had to partake in as a result of them keeping up their public images, they took shifts with Vader. Sheev Palpatine was a senator from the beautiful world of Naboo, while on the other hand Plagueis was Hego Damask II, which meant he was a part of a very powerful banking clan guild in the galaxy. Both men had their fair share of power in the galaxy, and these power positions were all for a reason, the reason being to build their reputation before taking over the galaxy for themselves. At this point though, when Plagueis and Palpatine weren't available, the young assassin known as Darth Maul was taking care of the boy. Maul was dealing with severe older brother syndrome. He was treated badly to begin with, but the notion of him having to take care of what he could consider a rival made him feel threatened. Vader wasn't too old, but by the time he reached age 9, he began to notice the way that Maul treated him, and truthfully, he didn't care for it. Vader felt as if he could earn more respect, and so, one day, he gave a bit of a bite back when Maul talked down to him. See, Maul didn't like that, and with the attitude coming back at him, he ignited his lightsaber. Maul was supposed to be heading to Naboo to assist with the Trade Federation, but he was busy stuck here with a stupid kid. Vader looked into the crimson and didn't fear it. He'd been training with a lightsaber since he was much younger, well, much younger than 9, and he was trained by both Plagueis and Palpatine with the Force. He simply looked at Maul and looked at Maul past the lightsaber. Maul growled when Vader showed no hesitation, and so Maul swung down violently towards Vader. The young boy whipped a lightsaber out and collided with Maul, throwing his blade backwards. Maul was shocked. He turned back and saw Vader raise his hands, and out from them came electricity. They sent Maul into the other side of the room. Maul looked over and he couldn't find the boy as the lights dimmed. Maul ignited his lightsaber as the crimson illuminated the room. Young Vader laughed menacingly, as his laugh echoed from each side of the room back into Maul's ears. The Sith assassin realized he made a mistake, and so he sheathed his lightsaber to hide himself. But for a child born in the darkness, this was no challenging feat. Maul tiptoed around, using the dark side to lock on to Vader, but the moment he found him, it was too late. Vader ripped his lightsaber through Maul's chest, cutting up through the Sith's neck, before watching Maul drop to the ground and the lights flickering back on. Out from the shadows, 2 claps could be heard. Plagueis and Palpatine knew this day would come, and Maul was just an experiment for little Vader to learn to resent. Of course, Palpatine would have liked a student to deal with the Jedi on Naboo. The truth is, it didn't really matter. And so with that, the blockade of Naboo would fall apart, with the Jedi returning after a little detour to Tatooine to pick up a boy named Anakin Skywalker. The entire series of events would play out like this. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn would liberate the planet Naboo from a blockade. Chancellor Valorum would be removed from power in a vote of no confidence for the Senator of Naboo, Sheev Palpatine, to rise in his place. The death of Palpatine's master, Plagueis, in an assassination, and the unison of the Naboo and the Gungans would all transpire. To cap off everything, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn would be surprisingly allowed to train Anakin Skywalker inside of the Jedi Order. The only reason the Council agreed to it was because of Skywalker's valiant effort to save the people of Naboo during the blockade. Obi-Wan Kenobi would become a Jedi Knight, and Qui-Gon Jinn would begin the training of Anakin Skywalker. There was also drama circulating inside the Jedi Order itself. It had been nearly a month since former Jedi Master Sidious went missing, and just a couple days before the end of the blockade of Naboo, his friend, Jedi Master Dooku, removed the planet of Kamina from the Jedi archives. Dooku was working with the Sith Lord, and yet he felt drawback to joining the Sith. The reason for this being that Qui-Gon Jinn never died on Naboo. Instead, Qui-Gon, while very open-minded like Dooku, was training the proclaimed Chosen One inside the Jedi Order. Dooku and Qui-Gon had varying conversations, but the truth is, Qui-Gon believed in the morals of the Jedi. While he was outspoken against the code of the Order, he believed they had the ability to make the right decision with said code. On the other hand, Qui-Gon didn't believe in the Republic. And while Qui-Gon was Dooku's student, he felt no real reason to want to create a clone army, join the Sith, or even betray the Jedi. While of course none of those would actually be brought up in conversation to Qui-Gon Jinn, Dooku would try and present a type of argument to try and get Qui-Gon to join him. But there wouldn't be any. Master Yaddle wouldn't end up stepping down from her seat on the Jedi Council. Dooku at this point had no knowledge that Maul had died, and was confused as to why the Sith assassin hadn't showed up yet. Truthfully, Dooku expected Maul to show himself and reveal the Sith to the Jedi during the invasion of Naboo. At this moment in particular though, the Jedi were under the belief that the Sith had gone for millennia without even being existent. Of course, that being far from the truth. Though they really saw little value in Qui-Gon training a 9-year-old boy. Though they trusted Qui-Gon enough, which to highlight is not a lot of trust, to train Anakin. Dooku would try hard to convince Qui-Gon to leave the Order, and when he didn't, he felt conflicted. Though Dooku had the self-righteous belief that Qui-Gon would eventually see his way and join him. For now, the lines were drawn, each child of the Force with their own true master. Palpatine would take the full mantle of training Vader as he welcomed Dooku to the ranks of the Sith, while at the same time Qui-Gon Jinn would train young Skywalker immediately and teach him how to use his emotions, the ones that made him unique, along with that of being a Jedi at his heart. Qui-Gon would assist Anakin in becoming the best version of a Jedi possible. The training would be difficult for both parties, though with a true father figure in Qui-Gon Jinn, Anakin would excel at a much faster rate than his counterpart in the dark side of the Force. Vader, on the other hand, was treated like a bad animal, beaten, electrocuted, and tortured until he understood that there was no mercy on the dark side, that he is to focus on his pride, thrive in his power, and drain the Force from others to become what he was truly meant to be. Vader thought he understood this. All things considered, it wasn't long before that he had got Darth Maul. For the next 10 years, training would continue, and both of the beings of the Force would have incredible growth. Skywalker would develop into Qui-Gon's little prodigy. He would be intact with all of his emotions. His mother would be living free on Tatooine, and he'd be more of a Jedi than most within the Order itself. Qui-Gon's teachings revolved around picking the right battles. Anakin was very naturally powerful, but with an unexperienced master, he wouldn't be able to distinguish what battles were to be won. With an experienced master, he was able to understand when and where to use the power that he had. He also had a very fiery and outspoken nature, something natural for a boy from Tatooine. Of course, during this time, Skywalker and Kenobi would be friendly, even brotherly, but they never had to cut through the tension of teaching. Qui-Gon was a perfect master for Anakin because, as an off-kilter Jedi, he was able to express to Anakin how to be himself in the eyes of the Jedi. Anakin donned longer hair, and he used a more aggressive lightsaber form, more aggressive than what Qui-Gon used. Vader, on the other hand, grew into a powerful young being. He was fierce and loyal like a Rancor. He bonded with Palpatine as if he was his father, but that wasn't by choice. It was how he was conditioned. Because Vader truly bonded with Plagueis, but when Palpatine killed Plagueis, he had to condition Vader to be his servant rather than his master's. Vader knew his place and never questioned it. He understood when to speak, and he knew how and when to present himself. He normally stood beside his master quietly, his yellow eyes being the only distinguishable feature from him, being that the rest of his body was covered in darkness. Vader used 5 out of 6 lightsaber forms of combat fluently, though the only one he didn't use was Form 3, because he believed it to be a form of fear and weakness. Palpatine saw this as a weakness from a student, but at the same time, Vader was so incredibly powerful with the dark side of the Force that he didn't really think it would matter if he had to use all of his lightsaber forms. Vader, when he was 16, was sent to Mustafar to learn about the dark side of the Force from an ancient Sith, though because he was 16, he made a misstep and almost died. Vader ineptly stumbled into lava, burning himself nearly to death. Palpatine was outraged and furious. He couldn't believe his student was so stupid, especially because Vader now needed to wear a mask. While yes, his skin was very badly damaged, the worst damage was done to his lungs. Time and Bacta would heal his body enough, especially his skin, but Vader would never be able to exist without some sort of mask and breathing apparatus. Originally, Sidious wanted Vader to resemble a Sith Lord of the past in Darth Malgus, by wearing an only-mouth tank to help him breathe, but Vader decided he wanted a full mask, believing that it would make him more terrifying to his foes, and the truth is, it did. The benefit of Vader only having been burnt is that he didn't lose any of his limbs or his connection to the Force. He was entirely put together. It was just missing skin, hair, and the ability to breathe without a breathing apparatus. Vader's suit was incredibly elastic, and he would be able to spend the next couple years getting used to a suit that he didn't need, but decided he wanted. Regardless, at this point, there was an issue with the Republic Senator Padme Amidala of Naboo. She was almost assassinated per request of Palpatine, though as Chancellor he demanded to send her away to Naboo with a Jedi escort. The Jedi Council would offer up Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he would go. Meanwhile, Skywalker and Jinn would investigate the nature of the assassin. The journey would lead Qui-Gon Jinn and Skywalker to Kamino, where they would learn of a massive clone army built for the Republic. Their journey from there would have the two Jedi following them to the planet of Geonosis. At this point, Anakin was still a Padawan. This wasn't Qui-Gon holding him back, but making sure that Anakin was the most prepared he could be before becoming a Jedi Knight. They arrived on Geonosis, and they were eventually captured, though not before making sure the Republic knew about this incursion on Geonosis. The Jedi Council couldn't believe what they had heard, but it led them to traverse across the galaxy in bulk. On Geonosis, Dooku wouldn't force Skywalker or Qui-Gon into the arena. Anakin would be left into a prison cell by himself. Dooku, on the other hand, would talk to his student to try and talk to him about what was happening in the galaxy. While yes, Jinn agreed that the Republic was corrupt, he believed that the Jedi had the chance to resolve these issues. Dooku told Qui-Gon that he was far too trusting in the Jedi Council. Qui-Gon reminded Dooku of the time they were on the disgraced planet when he was just a Padawan. Dooku looked at Jinn as he continued, reminding Dooku that he was right for seeing the Senator as a criminal, but the approach was wrong. To be a Jedi was to be better than to embrace the darkness, reminding Dooku that there were plenty of problems with the Jedi, but assassinating Senator wouldn't do anything positive for the galaxy. Trying to build an army wouldn't do anything positive for the galaxy. Dooku had fallen, and Qui-Gon admitted that he was disappointed in his master, disappointed to even be his student. Dooku looked down. He was saddened to hear how Qui-Gon felt about him. Before Dooku could say anything, he was thrown through a wall as Skywalker ignited his lightsaber and cut Qui-Gon down from out of the prison structure. Dooku's bones croaked as he tried to get up, though before he could do anything, he heard the sounds of ships. The battle had begun. The Republic was here and war had just begun. Qui-Gon told his apprentice they needed to find the Separatist Council and stop them before they escaped. The goal was to end the war before it could begin, though they would never have that chance. The Council had escaped, and now the Jedi were stuck in battle. Dooku would find his way off the planet and escape away. The war began and the lines were drawn. Qui-Gon wasn't okay with serving as a Jedi General, but he believed that he needed to serve the Republic, and on behalf of the Jedi, serve the greater good. Qui-Gon really hoped that he could bring his master back to the light, and much like the Jedi, he was blinded by his want to serve the galaxy, and so he fell into a trap set by the evil masters of the galaxy. Though Qui-Gon had talked to Yoda about giving Skywalker a student, because of Anakin's training he was able to understand the importance of training, and felt as if it would be good for him to take up a student in his own training. Even in the midst of war, it would be a sound idea for him to do so. Anakin would begin to take on the role of master for his student in Ahsoka Tano. Obi-Wan by this point had also taught a student all the way to the rank of knight, and he and Skywalker kept close as a bond throughout this period of time in their lives. Though on the other side of the galaxy, Palpatine was beginning to release his spawn of evil on the galaxy. Vader would get his first taste of victory by slaying the Jedi at the Republic. It would mostly be passed off as the death of the Jedi at the hands of General Grievous, because Vader was a blur to all those around him. He was quick and violent with his actions. the Clone Wars would jump off to an energetic start. While Palpatine never assumed anything about Skywalker, being that he had Vader, he slowly began to realize that Vader had an equal in the Force. Though by this time Palpatine noticed it, it was too late into the war. It was the middle of the war. Currently, Skywalker, his Padawan Ahsoka, his friend Kenobi, and his master Qui-Gon would be traveling towards their combined fleet when they were abducted into a planet. This would be the same case for the bringer of evil in the galaxy. It wasn't intentional. It was actually a mistake made by the father. He meant to bring Skywalker to Mortis so that he could resolve the balance, but instead he ended up bringing the Avatar of the Dark and the Avatar of the Light. Though this must have been by the will of the Force. It would take several days of being on Mortis until the Jedi would encounter Vader for the very first time. It would be nighttime. The Jedi would be split up. Anakin was with the father, and the son and the daughter were out trying to bring harmony and carnage. The daughter was with Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon, while the son was with Vader. The Jedi were walking out with the iridescent daughter. She talked to them about the Mortis until she felt the darkness, and heard the sound of breathing. She couldn't do anything because her brothers swooped down and crushed through her, throwing her against the wall, knocking her out. The son looked down and watched as Vader stepped forward, lifting his hand into the air, choking Obi-Wan before throwing him to the side, igniting his lightsaber. Skywalker could feel the disturbance in the Force as he and the father ran through the temple. Qui-Gon and Ahsoka ignited their weapons as they ran forward. Obi-Wan looked up, seeing the blur move from side to side, bashing down against Qui-Gon's blade, throwing him from his feet. Ahsoka was nimble enough to reciprocate the strength of Vader by moving around it and redirecting his strength away from her core. Kenobi got up and joined the battle as Skywalker ran down the steps of the temple, igniting his lightsaber as he did. Qui-Gon looked up. He was as old in his age, as he watched Kenobi get kicked in the stomach as Vader used the force of his metallic boot to shatter Obi-Wan's core before slamming his lightsaber through Obi-Wan's back. Qui-Gon cried out as he watched electricity flow through Vader's gloves, sending shocks into his own body, causing immense agony. Ahsoka ran forward with both of her lightsabers slashing away, though with 20 years of training from Sidious, Vader had not a fear in his mind, nor a thought, as he tore his lightsaber up and across, cutting Ahsoka's blade in half, before he reached out and pulled her into his grip with the Force. Anakin yelled out as his speed picked up. He ran as fast as he could, but Vader didn't care. He continued to electrocute Qui-Gon before he quickly snapped Ahsoka's neck in his hands before throwing her to the ground. Vader turned around and shot more electricity from both hands into Qui-Gon. Anakin got to Vader and swung heavily forward. Vader sidestepped back and used electricity to shock Skywalker's back. Anakin tumbled to the ground in pain as he looked over and saw Qui-Gon barely breathing, his skin ripped apart by the electricity. Anakin turned around and looked at Vader's soulless mask. A crimson lightsaber ignited as Skywalker stood up. He looked at his two dead friends and closed his eyes. Anakin searched for balance and he found it, as he looked up and saw Vader. The Sith student paced around as he swung forward. Anakin ducked under the swing and pushed Vader back. Anakin used his patience to watch every move of this animal. Vader moved with speed as he swung forward 3 times, trying to get to Skywalker, but it didn't work. Anakin kept pace before trading blows with Vader. The two of them traded blows as the son saw the opportunity, shooting electricity into Skywalker's back, throwing him from his feet. Vader saw an opportunity to take advantage of this. Skywalker rolled back and threw his hands up in the air. In the split second before the Force slammed into Vader, Anakin's hand was cut off. He yelled out in pain as he looked at his missing limb. Skywalker ignited his own lightsaber as he stood up, focused on himself, and he watched every move that this beast made. Vader rolled up as he looked at Skywalker. He realized in this moment that Skywalker wasn't a foe to be trifled with. Vader moved his lightsaber into an aggressive form as he lunged forward, striking at Anakin. Though the Chosen One swung his lightsaber behind his back and ducked under the swing, moments into his move he threw his lightsaber out and slammed it into Vader's back, throwing him from his feet. The son saw this and shot electricity at Skywalker again. Anakin again wasn't expecting it and cried out in pain. The daughter threw herself in front of Anakin to combat her brother. While Anakin was in shock, Vader hissed and ran away from the fight, limping away as his back was torn apart. The first duel was a victory for Vader. While yes, he was running away, he killed 2 of the 3 most important people in Anakin's life. Skywalker would, after realizing his foe was running away, turn to Qui-Gon to make sure he was alright. The other 2 were currently dead. He could feel it within the Force, and so he was here to make sure that his master would at least survive. The father, disappointed in his own failures, would release Vader and Skywalker. Qui-Gon would be able to make a recovery on a Jedi cruiser, but Skywalker would have to come to terms with losing his apprentice and his best friend. Though with the training of Qui-Gon, he was able to handle the situation a lot better than he would have otherwise, especially since at the moment, his biggest concern was the well-being of his master. Skywalker wanted to make sure that Qui-Gon Jinn survived this suffering. It would take several days inside of Bacta, but Qui-Gon would make a speedy recovery, to which he would tell Anakin that this was one of those times he should approach the Jedi Council regarding what they had just faced. Of course, for Anakin, he would have to get a metallic replacement for his missing hand, but it wasn't comparable to the emotional pain of losing his friends. The rest of the war would continue to transpire. Skywalker would have some difficulties with the death of his friends, but his difficulties wouldn't match the face of what Palpatine put his student through. Vader was tortured by Palpatine for his failure. That is, until Vader had enough of surrendering to someone who didn't have the same power as he did. It would be an instantaneous choice for Vader, as he would whip around with the speed of electricity, shooting out of his hands and driving his blade through Sidious's chest. Vader told his master that this empire would be his, as he ripped the blade out and kicked Sidious to the ground. This would cause an issue. Palpatine was the Chancellor, and one day he simply just went missing, something that typically doesn't happen to one's Chancellor. Though Palpatine wouldn't be returning, Dooku saw this as room to take advantage of the power vacuum, especially midway through the war, but that too wouldn't work as Vader sent assassins for Dooku. While the assassins wouldn't kill the Asian Count, Vader's arrival would cement the end of Dooku's life. The death happened in the waning hours of the Clone War. Then, because Vader saw Grievous as useful, non-worrisome as an ally, he would allow him to continue doing what he was doing. While the Republic tried to recover its government, a new senator would be elected to fill the role of Chancellor, which would be the peace-loving Senator Chuchi. The only reason being that Palpatine's focus on the war had vanished in his absence, and so did the support of the war. Senator Chuchi and her constituents still believed peace was an option, and while yes, Mina Bonteri had been killed for her belief in peace, there was still a chance, especially with Dooku and Palpatine out of the picture, to bring order to the galaxy. While their efforts certainly were valiant, the war continued. Grievous continued to rampage, and Vader was beginning to unleash the full power of the Separatists. The only issue being is that the Republic had already established a foothold and power of the galaxy. It was just a matter of who would come out victorious in the final months. Vader knew the Separatists were holding back their true power, and so he decided that in one fell swoop, they would try and take the galaxy with the strength rather than with brilliance. Grievous would be stationed on Cato Neimoidia, where Kit Fisto and a legion of clones would be sent to deal with them, and end the war for the Separatist effort in the core. While at the same time, Skywalker would be able to track Vader down to Sereno. The planet was being used as a capital for the Separatists, but without Dooku, leadership for the Separatists was inconsistent. Vader was here to claim power, especially after he murdered Dooku. Anakin was here on his own. He wasn't chancing the death of any other Jedi, no matter who it was, so he marched into Castle Sereno and found the Dark Lord of the Sith standing silently. Vader could feel Skywalker coming and he waited patiently for his arrival. Skywalker walked in and ignited his lightsaber, informing Vader that this would swiftly end. Vader continued to breathe, just igniting his lightsaber, and stepped forward. The two 21-year-olds lunged at each other, and the contest was ignited. The two of them were firing their power, and they both struck at each other with power and precision. They were both the ultimate powers in the galaxy, and Skywalker watched every move that Vader made and took advantage of each of them. Vader's lack of focus on lightsaber forms under Sidious would cost him here, for a short moment at least, as Skywalker realized the true weakness of his opponent. Skywalker took the same sidesteps before he used the Force to cripple Vader's breathing apparatus. The Sith started having difficulties with breathing as he swung violently forward, missing many of his strikes in terror. Anakin sidestepped, taking full advantage of Vader's recklessness. Anakin threw his blades forward, cutting off both of Vader's hands as he continued to suffocate, no longer having the ability to use his hands as a crimson lightsaber fell to the ground. Anakin watched the panic set in as his breathing began to shallow out. Skywalker kicked Vader in the chest, sending the bolt of air into the Sith Lord before the air was sucked out of him as he slammed into the ground. Anakin walked forward and looked down at Vader. All Vader could say is that killing him wasn't the Jedi way. Skywalker grinned as he sheathed his lightsaber, telling Vader that it was exactly why he was going to watch him painfully lose air and die here alone on the cold floor. Vader realized that Skywalker was right as he looked up and with the Force twisted a chandelier that was above Anakin's head and tried to bring it down. Skywalker knew what was happening, but acted oblivious. And the moment that the chandelier fell, he used the Force and directed it over Vader and slammed it down onto him. Vader was extinguished, and Anakin's mission wasn't yet complete. He immediately departed from the throne room to visit the Separatist Council. Anakin informed them that he was here on behalf of the Republic with a peace treaty. The Council was skeptical, but when the news came out that General Grievous had been defeated on Cato Modia by Master Kit Fisto, they realized that their fight was over. Not that they even wanted to continue it. The path to redemption had been set in stone. With peace filling the galaxy, there was a chance for everything to return to normalcy. Sure, the war had changed a lot of things, but it at least gave the galaxy room to change without total obliteration. Skywalker would assume the role of the Chosen One, though he would have to do so quietly, and he would do it with modesty. He would continue to serve beside Qui-Gon Jinn until Qui-Gon's eventual, natural death. Anakin would never leave the Order for love. Instead, he would find love in the art of teaching, always keeping the memory of his former Padawan and his late friend with him as he continued his journey in trying to make the galaxy a better place. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jonathan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Darth Cheesy Apollo, Mad Manny Studios, Anakin003, Lemon Knight, Flynn Van Cease, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Hit 2,000 likes on this video. I don't know what's coming next, but it is. If you want to see a what if, let me know below, or a comments below the crossovers. Check out the Twitch, community Discord, Patreon, and podcast if you want to support me in other ways. The podcast interview episode is out today. It's an interview. You guys asked all the questions. In the next 2 weeks, there might be a new interviewee, or there might be a specific topic. Go check out the podcast. It's pretty cool. Otherwise, let's talk about our story here. This was a lot of fun. This was kind of fun having two characters that are so prominent. Now, I already know what the comments are. I hate Ahsoka. No, I don't. Go watch the podcast. I tell you all about why and how I don't hate Ahsoka. But I know the comments coming, and so I'm going to say that. But no, this was actually a lot of fun to do. I think this was an idea that came from the comment section, or someone recommended it to me. I can't remember. But it was a really fun idea to work with because I got to play with two sides of Anakin Skywalker, acting as if they were two polar opposites. The difficult thing for me was kind of deciding where I wanted the story to begin. Because like you could say like, oh, what if Anakin and Vader were two separate beings in Revenge of the Sith? So like Vader splits off and Anakin splits off and they become two separate people. And that's something I could do in the future at some point, sure. But with this story in particular, I wanted to start as if they were two beings born of the Force, almost as if they were twins, just born separately, born on different places in the galaxy. And in a weird way, they technically would be like twins. They would be very similar to twins because they're both brothers in a way, because they're both born at the same time, created by the Force because Palpatine and Plagueis couldn't stop playing with the Force. So in a weird way, it kind of works like that. But the truth is, it was kind of fun because I had to try and figure out how I wanted to bring these two together. How exactly would I bring, Anakin and Vader into fighting with each other? And the most plausible way is the Clone Wars. And so the fun thing with this episode was actually like setting off a whole chain of events. Like obviously them being born is kind of a whole chain of events. But for example, Maul not existing until the Phantom Menace. And so like Maul dying before the Phantom Menace begins, or really during the movie, allows Qui-Gon to survive. And so I got to kind of have fun with Qui-Gon being the master. And so I kind of wanted to set it up where you weren't sure what was going to happen. And in a weird way, I'm challenging like nature versus nurture. Because in the beginning I said like, oh, one was born of the light and one was born of the dark, as if their fates had been set in stone. And then their fates were set in stone because one went to the Jedi and one went to the Sith. But you never know. I could have been saying that, the one born of darkness was Skywalker and the one born of the light was Vader. It's just a matter of perception. So maybe the deeper conversation, as I always talk about having a deeper code inside of a story, maybe the deeper conversation is one of nature versus nurture. Or even the same conversation that you see with something like Megamind, like, does one's upbringing affect their life? And that you see that also with what if Palpatine was a Jedi? That video that we did a long time ago. But this was a lot of fun. Like doing a story like this is a lot of fun because it's like I had to focus on the aspect of two characters that are basically the same character, but kind of change the surroundings of them. So I got to make Qui-Gon the master for Anakin, and then make Sidious the master for Vader, and have them both grow up surrounded by the light and the dark. And I think Anakin would have the slight edge, even though they're basically the same person. I think Anakin would have the slight edge because, Vader's basically an asthma attack ready to happen, which we all know, those of us with asthma know how fun that is. And so, like, I think that disadvantage for Vader is really what Anakin would take advantage of, and I think Anakin would lose the first fight. That's why there are 2 fights in this, because I think Anakin wouldn't actually win the first fight. I think Anakin just wouldn't have, like, maybe not the maturity, but like the complexity of being able to beat Vader in that first fight, especially because, you know, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan died. So other than me hating 2 characters that I actually love, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, smash that like, go support the other things. Otherwise, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.